The passengers were still boarding when the quiet woman stepped onto the plane. She wore simple jeans, a loose gray sweater, and carried a small handbag. Nothing about her appearance hinted at wealth, power, or authority. She looked like any other traveler trying to get home. But the two flight attendants at the entrance exchanged smirks the moment they saw her. "Ma'am," one of them said, blocking her path, "first-class passengers enter here. Economy is down that aisle." The woman blinked slowly. "I know where my seat is." The flight attendant folded her arms. "Then why are you holding up the line? Move along to economy, please." A few nearby passengers watched, whispering. The woman remained calm. "I'm in seat 1A. Both attendants burst into laughter. "You? In 1A? Oh, please. That seat costs more than your entire outfit. You're not on the list. Step aside." The woman exhaled quietly, as if she'd encountered this kind of treatment more times than she could count. She pulled out her boarding pass and handed it over. The attendant snatched it, glanced at it, then frowned. "This must be fake." "It was purchased by my assistant," the woman replied softly. "You can verify it." The attendant didn't bother. She simply waved toward the back. "If you don't move, we will call security." A man behind the woman cleared his throat. "Let her through. She clearly has a ticket." The attendant glared at him. "Sir, stay out of this." But the woman didn't argue. She simply turned slightly and said, "It's fine. They're doing what they think is right." She walked toward first class anyway, slipping past them before they realized she'd moved. The attendants rushed after her in disbelief. "Ma'am, you cannot sit there." But the quiet woman sat in 1A, placed her small bag beneath the seat, and looked forward calmly. That only made the attendants more furious. Moments later, the head attendant stormed over. "We've already contacted security. They'll remove you before the doors close." The woman simply nodded. "Okay." Her lack of panic made the attendants even angrier. A few minutes passed, and instead of security boarding, a tall man in a dark suit stepped in from the jet bridge. He walked straight to the first-class cabin with purpose. Passengers recognized him instantly. Some whispered his name. Others sat up straighter. He was the airline's chief operating officer, and more importantly, the quiet woman's husband. The attendants, unaware of who he was, immediately tried to complain. "Sir, we have a problem passenger. She's refusing to leave first class. Can you escort her back to economy?" He looked at his wife. She looked at him. They shared a calm, almost amused glance. The man turned to the attendants. "Is that what you believe is happening?" "Yes," the younger attendant snapped. "She clearly can't afford this seat." The man inhaled deeply. "Interesting." The attendants fell silent as he stepped closer to woman, his wife, and gently touched her shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Just tired," she replied. "But I knew you'd hear about it eventually." The attendant stared confused. "Sir," one stuttered, Why do you care?" He turned to them slowly. "Because she is not only a first-class passenger," he said. "Not only my wife, but also your CEO." The entire cabin froze. Gasps filled the aisle. Someone dropped their phone. One attendant turned pale instantly. The CEO of the entire airline, the woman they mocked, insulted, and humiliated for looking too simple. The head attendant tried to speak, but her voice cracked. We didn't know." The quiet woman looked up at them with the same serene expression she'd held from the start. "I know," she said, "but that's the problem." The COO nodded at the crew. "Gather the entire staff at the front. We're addressing this immediately." The attendants exchanged horrified looks as every flight crew member hurried forward, trembling. The woman rose slowly from her seat, turned toward them, and said, "Let's talk about professionalism and respect." And she stepped into the aisle, ready to speak. She stood in the aisle, calm as ever, while the entire flight crew lined up in front of her. Some avoided eye contact. Others looked like they were seconds away from bursting into tears. Passengers peeked over seatbacks, whispering wildly. The COO stepped aside, giving his wife the floor. Her voice remained gentle, but it carried through the cabin with quiet authority. "Tell me," she said softly. Why did you assume I didn't belong in first class? The head attendant swallowed hard. Because you looked casual, ma'am. Casual, the woman repeated. And casual means unworthy? No, ma'am, another attendant blurted. We just thought that I couldn't afford the seat, she finished. They flinched. She nodded. That's what I assumed. And that's why I'm asking. The woman walked slowly down the line, her hands clasped gently behind her back. Has anyone ever told you that judging a passenger by their clothing is acceptable? She asked. No, ma'am, they whispered. Has anyone taught you that raising your voice at a customer is part of good service? Again, a unified no, ma'am. She stopped and looked at each of them. So why did it happen? Silence. Passengers held their breath. Then one younger attendant finally whispered, We thought you were trying to sneak in. The woman nodded. But even if you believe that, the tone you used, the words, the disrespect, was that necessary? The crew shook their heads. Just then, a voice from first class spoke up, an elderly man. She's right. I've flown this airline for 12 years. I've never seen staff act like that toward a passenger. The crew stiffened in shame. The CEO turned briefly to the passengers. Thank you, sir. Then she looked back to her staff. I want you to understand something, she said. I wasn't going to fire anyone today. I boarded this plane hoping to get home quietly, not cause chaos. But your treatment of me could have been done to any other customer. That's what concerns me. The attendants lowered their heads. The CEO continued, her voice steady. I am more interested in fixing a broken attitude than punishing people. But before I make any decision, I need honesty. She faced the head attendant. When I showed you my boarding pass, did you think it was fake? The woman nodded shamefully. Yes. And did you try verifying it? No. Why not? The head attendant's eyes filled with tears. Because I assumed someone dressed simply couldn't afford first class. Gasps echoed through the cabin. The CEO inhaled slowly, deeply. Thank you for your honesty, she said. Now I know where the real problem lies. Her husband stepped closer. What do you want to do? But she didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a seat in the front row, motioning for the crew to stay where they were. I will decide after we land, she said softly. For now, please return to your duties. Treat every passenger respectfully. Consider this your final chance to show me who you truly are. The crew nodded, trembling and dispersed. Passengers watched them with a mix of sympathy and judgment. The CEO leaned back in her seat, staring out the window, utterly calm. But her mind was far from calm. Something deeper was troubling her. The engines hummed softly as the plane settled into cruising altitude. But inside the CEO's mind, a storm was forming. She hadn't told anyone, not even her husband, why this particular incident had cut so deeply. She closed her eyes, remembering a moment from years ago, a moment almost exactly like this one. A younger version of herself, exhausted after 2 jobs, denied a seat she had worked so hard to afford, simply because she didn't look the part. She remembered standing alone, humiliated, promising herself she would one day change the system that judged people by appearances. Now here she was, in charge of that system. Her husband leaned closer. You're thinking about the old days, aren't you? She nodded slowly. This isn't just about them being rude. It's about all the people who experience this kind of treatment daily. I can't let it continue. Meanwhile, in the galley, the flight crew scrambled to regain control of their nerves. The head attendant wiped her face with trembling hands. We're done, one whispered. You know that, right? Not if we show her we can do better, the younger attendant insisted. I messed up. I know I did. But maybe we can fix it. Back in first class, the CEO pulled out her tablet and began reviewing the crew's performance logs. What she saw made her jaw tighten. Not just 1 or 2 complaints, but a pattern. Inconsistent service, arrogant behavior, a tendency to treat passengers differently based on appearance. Her decision became clearer. Suddenly, the captain's calm voice echoed over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're approaching a patch of turbulence. Please remain seated. The plane dipped slightly. Passengers held on to their armrests. The CEO didn't move. She'd ridden through worse. But halfway through the turbulence, something surprising happened. The crew, despite their fear of judgment, performed flawlessly. They checked on every passenger calmly, reassuringly, professionally. They comforted an elderly woman gripping her seat. They guided a nervous teenage boy through breathing exercises. They even approached the CEO with a soft, respectful tone. "Are you comfortable, ma'am? Would you like water?" For the first time since boarding, the CEO saw sincerity instead of arrogance. Minutes later, the turbulence passed. Applause broke out for the captain. But the CEO noticed a subtle change in the passengers' expressions. They now looked at the crew with appreciation, not suspicion. The head attendant approached her after the seatbelt sign turned off. "Ma'am, I know I can't undo what happened, but I want to be better. We all do, not because of our jobs, but because it was wrong." The CEO studied her face. No excuses, no defensiveness, just honesty. It reminded her of something her mentor once told her. People don't grow when they're punished. They grow when they're guided. Her husband leaned toward her again. "Were you thinking?" She finally stood, signaling the entire crew to gather. Passengers watched in hushed silence. The CEO looked at each attendant with steady eyes. "I've made my decision," she said quietly, "and it affects all of you." The crew braced themselves. The entire cabin held its breath. Then she spoke.